Hey Jakub, it's wonderful to see you again. It's been a while. How are you?
Hi, Ruud. Great to see you as well, and thanks for having me here. Yeah, all is fine here in Prague. I hope you are safe in the Netherlands.
We're all fine here. We're so happy to have you because I think if we talk about Russian state actor disinformation, we couldn't have gotten a better person. Because can you tell something about yourself?
Thank you very much. So I started working in the topic of Russian propaganda and disinformation in 2015 when I joined the EU East Stratcom Task Force. That's a unit that was designed specifically to challenge the Russian disinformation campaign. And there I was leading on our third objective, which was raising the awareness about Russian disinformation, for which we had the EU versus Disinfo campaign. Since autumn 2018, I'm a member of the Atlantic Council, a US think tank, which I think is the most active on this planet in the regard of disinformation. So I was really happy that I could join them. I worked in the Ukrainian election task force, where we had a project for monitoring disinformation targeting Ukrainian presidential elections. And now I'm a member of the Digital Forensic Research Lab, where we explain and expose disinformation wherever it might appear. So we have people all around the planet. Most of them work on other topics than just Russian disinformation, but I'm still mostly focused on Russia.
Great. So basically, you were already in the field when I think there were like maybe 3 mentions of disinformation per year on when you look in the newspapers. Yeah.
Back in 2015, it's true that there weren't many people covering the topic. I think you would find most of them in the east of Europe, in the 3 Baltic republics, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and a lot of experts in Ukraine. We were actually trying to change that in Brussels, and Mr. Putin helped us really a lot with this. So I think not only thanks to our work, but also thanks to him, a lot of people know about Russian propaganda now. So he's helped our cause.
Great.
So actually, the easiest way to describe it is to start with the famous Operation Infection. I'm sure you heard about it. It was the operation in the 80s, where a small Indian newspaper called Patriot said that AIDS is an invention of CIA and that is being deliberately spread. And then it had some variations that, for example, it's a biological weapon aimed to eradicate the black population of the United States, etc. And a few years later, Yevgeny Primakov admitted that it was a KGB operation from the very beginning. I think that what we see now is a very similar pattern. We see that the virus is portrayed as a biological weapon of the United States that's deliberately planted in China, but it's supposed to threaten other populations as well. It's quite fascinating that the pattern repeats itself for several decades. I mean, the Operation Infection actually wasn't the first such instance. We have seen similar cases already in the 50s during the Korean War. Every new virus is immediately being portrayed as deliberately orchestrated massive campaign that the Americans did.
But the interesting part was that they had to publish that in an African newspaper, I believe, and then transport that to the United States as a source for the rumors. I believe. Is that what? Do you remember that or?
The Operation Infection?
Yeah. Well,
that started in Indian newspaper.
Indian.
And then Indian newspaper Patriot. I believe they were known for their kind of communist stance. But later it surfaced that they are basically a front organization of the KGB. And then later it was confirmed by Eastern German scientists. They confirmed that this is a valid theory. And yeah, then I think one of the messages within this narrative was that the virus is targeting specifically Africans, so that might have been the African angle there.
Okay.
But actually, the pattern is kind of similar. We have seen the Russian or pro-Kremlin media spreading this kind of messaging that it's actually a weapon of the United States. We have also seen, I'm actually not even sure why, but Bill Gates is very often accused of constructing the virus. Obviously, George Soros, he's the evil boogeyman who's supposed to blame. We have seen a few instances of accusing the migrants of spreading the virus. This happened specifically in Hungary, where even Viktor Orban was actually spreading it. And I'm mentioning it because it's kind of a very Russian-like approach. You are using the current virus for your own political purposes, regardless of the fact that it's an obvious lie.
And you see that spread in the Czech Republic as well through.
You would see a few pro-Kremlin media spreading that. However, you wouldn't see. Fortunately, it doesn't have a lot of impact. These particular conspiracies. I mean, that's not to say that the pro-Kremlin media in Czech Republic don't have an impact. They do. But
then you're talking about Czech media that have a pro-Kremlin stance, or about Russian state media active in the Czech Republic as well.
Well, we have only so from the Russian state media we have only Sputnik, but you would see many outlets that are copy-pasting what they see on Sputnik and multiplying it to their audiences, and also adding something extra. So
if you compare it to the AIDS virus, what you see now is that they don't have an Indian newspaper that needs to publish something, but they have their own state media, and then other media copy that. But do we then also see that use of authority, like that it's being that there's proof from scientists in Eastern Germany that actually say like this story is actually true? Do you see that happening as well?
Wow, I'm not even sure actually if I've seen any kind of pseudo-scientific reports confirming these conspiracies. I'm not sure I have seen them yet. No, not yet.
So it's basically a flood of narratives that you see coming around that use like the same enemies, like the migrants and high level conspiracy victims in that sense.
Yeah. Here, it seems to me that here in Czech Republic, the narrative about migrants isn't succeeding very much. It might be because we don't have almost any migrants here. So it's hard to say that migrants are spreading COVID if you don't have any migrants, but you have COVID. But I think you would see quite a lot about Bill Gates, about George Soros, a lot of about the 5G networks, that 5G networks facilitate the spread of the virus. This is also spread by the pro-Kremlin outlets. I mean, they always spread any kind of ridiculous conspiracy. It's part of their modus operandi. If your aim is to undermine the credibility of solid sources of information, like the governments or the mainstream media or government public media, then part of the mission is actually to spread any kind of ridiculous conspiracy that says, don't trust what the media say.
And next to that, it might have political effects. Is it also? I mean, I guess it might be popular as well because it has a high entertainment value, higher than news about people that like the standard journalism isn't that. Well, I mean, conspiracy theories are much more powerful in their emotional content, etc. Do you see that it's being picked up and spread a lot as well because of that entertainment value?
Partly, but surely not only, because I mean, I'm sure you also have tabloids in the Netherlands. I mean, they are specialists creating these clickbaity headlines, even when it's not about conspiracies. We actually see quite interesting development in the past 6-9 months in the local version of Sputnik, in the Czech version of Sputnik. Not only conspiracies, but they also try to attract the audience on semi-naked girls, girls in bikini and stuff like that. And it's a very typical tabloid technique. You are trying to attract the male audience that's clicking on girls in bikini.
And army stuff often, right? Like I saw a video. I mean, it's like the type of clickbait that gets into mainstream media as well, where you see a Russian fighter jet spraying "Stay at home" in the sky with his jet engines, like that. I mean, it's basically who would do that for practical purposes, but it shows strength and it's again sort of entertainment instead of information supply. And how about the social media atmosphere? Have you seen more coordinated inauthentic behavior around Russian disinformation about COVID-19?
I don't think I have, actually. I have to admit, I don't think I have seen anything very, very obviously inauthentic happening on the social media. Maybe something slipped my attention, but I have to admit I haven't seen something similar to, for example, MH17 campaign when they were really populating the social media with hashtags. So that's probably not happening with the COVID crisis. I think it might also show that this topic is kind of not like #1 topic for them. I mean, the crisis came, people are reading about it, people want to read about it, so obviously they use it for their purposes. But it's not like MH17 or war in Ukraine or war in Syria, where they really have an agenda that they are trying to push. So I think it's kind of second level importance of this message. So I haven't seen something like very sophisticated, very organized, inauthentic.
Not like, because I'll be speaking with Nadia tomorrow, and I believe that what they've seen from China was, for instance, an increase of about 250% or so of Twitter accounts from Chinese embassies, etc. But of course,
Chinese are becoming much more active in this crisis. I actually think that some researchers were writing in the last year approximately that they observed something like a Russification of Chinese propaganda. That previously it used to be just about defending the image of China. So we are not violating human rights and we are not exterminating Uyghurs, etc. But suddenly they see that it's not just about portraying Russia or portraying China in a positive light, but it's also about attacking the enemies. And this approach, which is very typically Russian, and the Russians even admitted it, that we realized that talking nicely about Russia isn't enough, and that we have to attack the enemy, attack the United States, attack the European Union. China started with this in Hong Kong and in Taiwan during the protests and during the Taiwan elections, for example. But I think the COVID crisis is the first instance when we see that China is applying these weapons also in the West, in precisely the Chinese embassies. For example, the one in France, they were very aggressively accusing Americans of spreading the virus all around the world. So it's not China, it's actually the Americans, and B, accusing local authorities of not handling the crisis really well, which is kind of in line with them trying to portray that the autocratic government is better than the free.
Is that a sort of comparable to what Russia and what happened with Russian disinformation in Ukraine in 2014? Like, because what I discovered for myself was that basically the disinformation had always been to keep a national audience in control, whereas suddenly they found out we can actually do that same trick in Ukraine, and then I mean in 2017 we saw it in America. Is it a similar pattern that we see now with China in a way, a little bit?
It seems to me actually that it has a lot of similarities. Yeah, I think it's also partly we have to blame ourselves, because we haven't managed to react to the Russian disinformation robustly enough. We have shown that we don't care. It's like the Russians have attacked so many elections and referenda since 2014. Just in the Netherlands, you remember the 2016 association agreement referendum, where the Russians were active. The same year it was the Brexit referendum and the US elections. The following year it was the French elections and the German elections. And Europe still hasn't reacted. We still haven't done anything. Just this week, the Germans have started to discuss sanctions for cyber attacks in 2015. So when are we going to react to what happened in 2016?
Well, I agree, and I think what also is important in connection with that is that when we talk about those state actor influence campaigns, and especially from Russia, most of the people then say, yeah, but I have never seen any Russian propaganda coming in my timeline, etc. But that you have this difference between what you see on the surface and the techniques behind it, like using, for instance, a service like Cambridge, what Cambridge Analytica had. What they offered was, of course, something that you do not see in the service, but it affects you because it's actually it's far more complex, but it does have a real effect on how you see the world.
Precisely. And it's this. You use the divisive topics that are kind of tailor-made for the precise population. Currently in the United States, we see that the racial question is again being exploited by both Russian and Chinese sources. And that doesn't mean that they have created the crisis. No, but they are excellent in exploiting it and feeding it and making it worse. So A, it's this, and B, it's that Russian propaganda doesn't come with a big fat stamp. I am Russian propaganda. It's like so when you have we have Miloš Zeman, who's regularly spreading the Russian lies about Czech Republic. Our own president is actually spreading Russian lies here. We have Marine Le Pen in France. We have Nigel Farage in the United Kingdom. You have Thierry Baudet. I mean, almost every country has its own Russian useful idiot who is spreading the propaganda for them. So you can't say that this is not Russian propaganda when a local politician is spreading it. It's still Russian propaganda. When someone says that MH17 was shot down by Ukraine, it's still Russian propaganda, no matter whether it's said by a Russian, by a Czech, or by a Dutchman.
And to what degree do you think that the Russian disinformation narratives around COVID-19 are meant for international audiences, and to what degree are they also meant for the national audience?
I think there will be a bit of difference because you would also see that the Russian media that aim at the domestic Russian population, they are spreading something a little bit different than the media that are aimed at the population abroad. So, for example, Вести недели or Первый канал, they will have a bit different messaging than, for example, Russia Today in Spanish. I would say that the main aim for the kind of inward directed propaganda towards the Russians, that's to persuade them that the Russian state is handling the crisis brilliantly and that everybody else is failing. Europe doesn't manage to manage the crisis, and the United States are failing. So it's about exaggerating the problems abroad and about persuading the population that your local authorities are handling it brilliantly. I think the messaging directed outside of Russia, it's a bit less about Russia. So I don't think you would see a lot about Russia is handling it brilliantly, but it would be about undermining the local authorities. And by the way, it's actually a very similar pattern that, for example, China uses in Taiwan. I was just exchanging a few emails with my friends on this island, and they were saying that Chinese were precisely accusing the local authorities of not handling the crisis, despite the fact that Taiwan has a ridiculously low number of those who have the disease and those who actually die because of the virus. So you can see that the Chinese are really applying the Russian playbook. I think we might have a bigger problem because I mean, unlike Russia, China actually has the resources for this. They have a lot of money.
Yeah.
And if we have a look what the Russians managed to do with not a lot of money, then the Chinese power might be really much more threatening.
Yeah, because just for our viewers, when we talk about state actor activity from Russia, how much proof do we have that we really see that the state is involved in this matter instead of just blaming Russia as a complete country?
Well, I actually, when I'm writing articles, for example, I always try to stick to the term pro-Kremlin, because I do not like to accuse the Russian state as a whole. As you know yourself, we have many brave Russian journalists in Russia who are actually writing stories, thanks to which we know how this propaganda machine is organized. So it's, for example, the journalists in Novaya Gazeta, it's journalists from Projekt. They have written a brilliant example about how this state propaganda machine is organized, that it goes from really the top of the Kremlin, the deputy head of the presidential administration, Alexei Gromov. He's heading these regular weekly meetings where he instructs the media what they should be saying, how they should be addressing different topics, etc. And we know that this top-down approach is really going all the way to the, let's say, Serbian office of Sputnik. So really, it goes like top down like this. For example, we know it thanks to whistleblowers who have worked in the Russian state media. We know it thanks to whistleblowers who worked for example, Sputnik in the United States or Sputnik in Germany, that all sensitive topics, precisely like Ukraine, Syria, MH17, Salisbury, Skripal poisoning, all of these sensitive topics are always consulted with the Moscow headquarters. And the people from the Moscow headquarters, they visit the meetings in the Kremlin. So it's really like a very, very military approach, like very top-down approach.
But is there also, because I had the feeling around, for instance, the Maidan uprising, that there was also a sort of grassroots movement from state journalists to actually sort of impress the hierarchy in creating stuff that at some points led to a sort of, okay, now you've gone too far. Now you have to admit that there wasn't a boy crucified in this square. So, I mean, is it a sort of, is it a little bit of both?
That's what I actually wanted to say, that apart from this top-down approach, we can see that there is a bottom-up approach where the people who are kind of on the lower level, they are creating their own disinformation narratives and stories, and they are kind of offering them to the people up there. And there is a very strong competitive environment where only the strongest actually succeed. And for example, the famous Lisa case in Germany, I think that's a brilliant example of this, because this is a story that didn't start in the Russian state media. No, not at all. This started in a blog post, Genosse SU, if I remember it correctly, which is meant for the Russian-speaking Germans or Russians living in Germany. And only later, when it got a big engagement on social media, only later the story got picked up by the Russian state media. And only later, when it got picked up by Russian state media, it got picked up by Sergei Lavrov, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So there we saw that it was actually going from bottom to the top level. We had this similar guy here in Czech Republic and in Ukraine and in several Central and Eastern European countries, who was very active in organizing pro-Russian protests and also creating these troll armies that were spreading these messaging, Alexander Usovsky. And this guy basically created this whole communication campaign, and only later he offered it to Konstantin Malofeyev, the Kremlin oligarch, if he would like to finance it. So you can see that people are actually trying It's like competition for grounds,
but it's a sort of crowdsourcing your disinformation campaigns. Yeah, smart move.
I think it is.
Just as a last question, so you're saying that we see a lot of narratives from Russia and that they've taken up the opportunity of this crisis to spread their own, mix it in with their own disinformation campaigns, but you haven't really seen coordinated efforts in ways that we've seen around MH17 and other topics where they really had an agenda. What would you say that the effects of Russian disinformation at this stage are around COVID-19?
This is always the hardest thing to measure, because very often you would see that the Russian campaign is joined by local useful idiots who are spreading the same messaging, and then it's really hard to distinguish what is the impact of the Russians and what is the impact of the local actors. I think that the most hopeful way how to measure it would be regular opinion polls that would tell us how many people believe exactly that MH17 was shot down by Ukraine, or that Skripal was poisoned by MI6. Unfortunately, we do not have such polls. I have seen.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. So I have seen only one poll with regards to COVID that was measuring one of the disinformation narratives, and that was that the virus was created intentionally. And the number was that 30% of Americans believe that, which is actually, in my opinion, quite high, given the fact that we have no scientific evidence for it. 1/3 of population believing an obvious lie, I think that's quite a lot. Unfortunately, I haven't seen such an opinion poll anywhere in Europe, so I don't know.
But it's basically that what it's doing then is adding more weight to the sort of parallel infoverse, like if we have the basically creating a parallel universe with a different information stream that becomes more accessible and more valuable if more people add to it. And basically what you're saying is that the Russian disinformation is constantly adding to that storyline, so that if you start looking for sources, you might actually find a lot of them all coming from different Russian state actors.
I think it varies. It will be different, I think, with almost every campaign. So, I mean, in this particular virus campaign, I think you would find a lot of local conspiracy theorists and, just fools who are simply spreading whatever nonsense they might. And then the Russians might use them. But then in certain cases, I think precisely when the Russians have an agenda, so when it comes to the big topics we have already mentioned, but also, for example, to local elections where they really want the pro-Russian candidate to succeed, like Miloš Zeman in Czech Republic or Marine Le Pen in France, I think there they will be the ones who will be shaping the agenda. So in one case, they will probably just harvest what is already on the ground, and in the other case, they will probably try to plant the seeds. Yeah. But we had this Czechoslovak defector, Ladislav Bittman, and he was describing the work of a disinformer. He was likening it to an evil doctor, and the doctor is trying to make the most precise diagnosis of the patient, try to find all his weaknesses, and then try to make them worse. That's the evil part. So it's like, yes, they are looking for something that is already in us, but they are trying to make it worse. So that's the tricky part. Yeah.
Thanks so much.